Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this little video that I found to be very particularly interesting. And you guys know me every once in a while. And once again, for those of you that tuned in to the live stream yesterday and watched some of the commentary, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. But of course, for those of you that also know my channel, you know that I like to review videos here and there, especially by that of the LDBC in new media, mainly because their hypocrisy and their racial narratives know no bounds. But in this video, it's going to be a very similar situation. For those of you, of course, that did not end up watching the fight, David Benavidez pretty much dominated that of Demetrius Andrade after the first 3 rounds. The first 3 rounds, some of them were a little bit competitive. I probably had Andrade winning the majority of the first 3 rounds, the first half of the fight, because that fight only lasted 6 rounds. I believe I actually gave Andrade the first 3 rounds on my scorecard. But rewatching it, I believe, on certain highlights and also, on that of YouTube, because unfortunately Showtime does not give you a replay option, which is very unfortunate, but it is what it is. But when I was rewatching it, it appeared to me that David Benavidez possibly could have won more earlier rounds. So you could debate that Benavidez did win 4 to 5 rounds in this fight. I probably would say that Andrade at least won 2 rounds in this fight for me, just in my personal view. But it would be up to your scorecard. But anyways, in this video, DontaesBoxingNation, because Andrade, they predicted Andrade to win this fight. They basically had to. And the reason why that is because they've been saying for Andrade for years upon years upon years that he was going to beat Canelo, that he was way better than this guy, way better than that guy, that he truly deserves to be top 10 pound per pound. And this is why I never put Demetrius Andrade within my top 10 pound per pound, because you need to have results. And, you can say that, you're this exceptional talent all you want to, but I need to see it in the ring. And it's no offense against Demetrius Andrade, but for this being the first test in his career, and I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, he fought valiantly and he showed a lot of heart, right? But there's only so much credit I can give you for showing a lot of heart. And a lot of these channels like Ego and Dante, they always love to give their favorite black fighters a lot of credit and say, you know what, I'm going to give them their flowers. But then when it comes to fighters like Lomachenko or other fighters that they're clearly trying to tear down, they have no problem, clearly trying to be vicious in their criticism. So once again, or, very blunt and harsh, which I have no problem with, to a certain degree, being blunt, and being very straightforward. But at the end of the day, don't put the kid gloves on for a certain fighter just because he's a black fighter. All right? It is what it is. And when it comes to Demetrius Andrade, is no offense, but he came across like a hype job in this fight. It just is what it is. And I'm not going to call him a hype job necessarily. But once again, I've already stated this about Demetrius Andrade. In my view, he's been the most overrated talent and one of the more overrated fighters of the past 10 plus years. I kept hearing about this skill set out of this world. I kept hearing about how he's the Floyd Mayweather of the 154 and middleweight divisions. I kept hearing about, how he was the best fighter at 154, how he was the best fighter, at 160, how he was going to be the best fighter at 168, and he was going to dominate all these people. I never seen that fighter, and I didn't see him last night either. So once again, could it maybe be because of the age? Could it maybe be because of the size? Maybe there was a tactical issue. I don't know. But in my personal view, Andrade, even though for the great talent that he was, and I do still believe that he was an A-grade level fighter, I just don't think that he was ever on the level as what a lot of people were always trying to say that he was. Just in my personal view, he does have certain flaws. And on top of that, he's also never had the greatest gas tank in the world that showed up in this fight yesterday. It just is what it is. But anyways, DontaesBoxingNation is going to talk about it. And what you're going to hear him say is that Demetrius Andrade, that basically after coming up from 3 weight classes, that he couldn't handle the size. And of course, that's, very hypocritical because there's no excuse for that at Canelo Alvarez. Because we all know that Canelo started off as a champion, as a legitimate champion at 154 pounds. I believe when he defeated Matthew Hatton, I believe at 154 pounds. But there is none of those excuses when he fights Dimitri Bivol. Canelo, go fight Dimitri Bivol. Canelo, go fight Artur Beterbiev. Canelo, go fight David Benavidez. Canelo, if you're going up to cruiserweight, don't just fight that Avalunga Makabu. Fight Alexander Usyk. And this is how you know that they believe that Canelo Alvarez was truly the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. Because when you're the king, when you're the main one in power, you're not allowed to be the victim role whatsoever. You know, people around you can always throw jabs at you. They can always throw jests around you. They can always throw jokes and criticism around you. But as soon as the king, or as soon as anything like that, as soon as they take their way, or as soon as they do something that maybe other people would look as a little bit lower than what the king should be, then they complain. Then they go to their victim mentality. That's why Demetrius Andrade, you know, none of these guys would ever say, you know what, Andrade, go fight Sergey Kovalev at 175. Go up and fight David Benavidez immediately. Fight Dimitri Bivol. Fight Artur Beterbiev if you truly want some of those big fights, because we 100% believe in your skill set. They would never say that. You know why that is? Because they never believed that Andrade or Charlo or any of these other fighters were on the same level as Canelo Alvarez. Now, of course, that being said, Canelo has been touted as the debatable #1 pound-for-pound fighter for a while. So they could be saying that, you know, Canelo Alvarez, that if that is the ranking that you want to give him, then he should be able to do this stuff. And, you know, somewhat of that is, you know, fair. However, if you're also stating that Andrade would clearly beat Canelo Alvarez and is a much better fighter than Canelo Alvarez, as what Dante and a lot of these LDBC and new media channels have been saying, then you should have no problem with Andrade fighting that at David Benavidez, just like you're asking Canelo Alvarez to do, and Dimitri Bivol and some of these other guys. But there was no excuse from them when it came to Canelo Alvarez losing to Dimitri Bivol. He just lost because he was clearly outskilled against Bivol, even though there clearly also was a size advantage. I've already been telling people this. Canelo Alvarez is pretty much built like a middleweight fighter. He rehydrates decently heavily, but I keep telling people this. There's a lot of people around those weight divisions that rehydrate around the same weight as him. Andrade weighed in at about 190-something pounds yesterday. Now, that's a little bit heavier for him usually, but he looked the same exact size as David Benavidez. So I'm sorry, but, you know, even though the size is probably a little bit, you know, of a valid excuse, because Benavidez, in my view, really is a light heavyweight in there, at the very least, you know, when it comes down to it. Andrade pretty much looked the exact same size, and I already told people this. If he has this skill set out of this world, if he is 10 times better than Caleb Plant, if he is the guy that I keep hearing about, you know, within his fan base, he will defeat David Benavidez, or at least give him a very tough fight and a better fight than Caleb Plant. Not only did he not win the fight, he didn't even come close to Caleb Plant's performance in that of the fight. Caleb Plant was able to pull out 4, you could possibly even debate a good solid 5 rounds in the David Benavidez fight. There was one judge that scored it 7, there was one judge that scored it 8 rounds to 4 and another one that scored it 7 rounds to 5. The judges on the scorecards in this one, even though you could argue that it was a bit too wide, they scored it pretty much all for David Benavidez. You know, so once again, I don't want to hear ever again about how Andrade is 10 times better than Caleb Plant. He's much better than some of these guys, blah, blah, blah. And this is why, for so many years, I stated that, in my view, Andrade and Charlo never truly set themselves apart that much from Billy Joe Saunders and that of a Caleb Plant especially. The only way they're different is that they're black fighters. And, you know, people got to stop doing this shit where just because they're a black American fighter that they think that they're going to be the next Floyd Mayweather Jr. And don't get me wrong, Canelo, in my view, those were 2 great fights. Now, Charlo turned down the fight, I believe, once. You know, now the Andrade fight, Canelo Alvarez never really took, because once again, I think he always thought that it was a little bit too much risk for the reward, especially because Andrade, he just has no names on his resume. But once again, this is a big part of the reason why I said, you know, I'm not quite so sure if Andrade is really that much better than Caleb Plant. And in this fight, he looked even worse. So once again, but anyways, let's see what Dante's Boxing Nation has to say. Let's get straight into it.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So David Benavidez just gets the biggest win of his career, stopping Demetrius Andrade after 6 rounds. Considering the fact that this was Boogeyman versus Boogeyman, it was a very impressive win by David Benavidez. The first 3 rounds, Andrade did very well. He made it very hard for David to land any punches. And Andrade, he was landing good counter punches and throwing good combinations. But you could...
Well, he was landing okay counter punches. But what he was mainly landing was good combos. And he was pushing him back to a degree. And I thought that he looked good within the first 3 rounds. But it was almost like a vampire was in his corner or something in that 3rd round. Because in that, you know, in the last 30 seconds to a minute of that 3rd round, Andrade he just clearly was starting to become more drained. I noticed it. A lot of other people noticed it. The announcers noticed it. And then that fourth round, he was just completely done. Like, he had literally no stamina. He had no legs. He had no stamina. Just nothing. That was the thing that really surprised me the most. I had certain people in my comment section when I was doing a live saying I think it's going to be a mid-round TKO. I got to say, out of all the stoppages, I certainly did not predict that. I'm not going to say that I was shocked necessarily, but just the lack of stamina that Demetrius Andrade had, that really shocked me. I mean, I expected him to at least last throughout the second half of the fight.
Clearly see a shift in the third or the fourth round. This is when Benavidez, he started landing more body shots and he started applying more pressure. And with Demetrius Andrade moving up 3 weight classes, he couldn't deal with the size or the power of David Benavidez. David, he truly earned that nickname that Mike Tyson gave him, the Mexican Monster, with this win.
And once again, Andrade really was not landing great counter strikes within this fight. He was landing some good punches to the body. He was landing some good counter punches to the body. But once again, Andrade allegedly 10 times better than Caleb Plant and some of these other guys. Where were these great counter punches within the mid-range and to the head and, to some of David Benavidez' weaknesses? He wasn't able to do it at all. So that's why I'm saying, you never know truly how good or how great a fighter is until they finally step in the ring with somebody. And, it's no offense against Andrade, but after this, he certainly is no better than Caleb Plant. He might even be worse than Caleb Plant.
Over Andrade. And now he has Canelo Alvarez as mandatory. And now it is going to be extremely difficult for Canelo Alvarez to keep avoiding David Benavidez. He's been avoiding both Andrade and David Benavidez for years. But after a win like that by...
Well, I don't think he's really been avoiding David Benavidez. I think basically what he's telling David Benavidez is that, listen, dude, if you're going to fight me, it's going to be worthwhile. You got to get a couple names on your resume. Right now, you're not really a confirmed fighter. And Terrence Bud Crawford is pretty much telling Jerome Boutsenis the same exact thing. But I don't think Crawford plans on fighting that at Jerome Boutsenis. I think Canelo plans on fighting that at David Benavidez. But he says, listen, if you're going to fight me, dude, it's got to be worthwhile. I am the king of boxing. I am the main cash cow. And if I'm going to give you a shot at my belts and at my legacy, a shot at me, that means if I win the fight, that you got to be somewhat of a big name. Floyd Mayweather Jr. had a very similar energy. He had a very similar type of thing. That's why a lot of the times when he would fight somebody, they would have to come off debatably the biggest win of their career or one of the biggest wins of their career. So it is what it is. And, and I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, Canelo fights a lot of guys coming off the worst. But no, he really doesn't. Now, there's a couple of people that maybe you can argue, but Danny Jacobs, when he fought Danny Jacobs, Danny was coming off the win over Sergey Derevyanchenko. This alleged A-grade fighter, when Jamal Charlo beat him, but then not, in other sentences, depending on, what they want to say that day, depending on the fighter, But when it comes down to it all in all, Canelo has fought a lot of great fighters when they were pretty much at the best point in their career, So it is what it is.
David Benavidez, it's going to be very difficult.
And I think Canelo Alvarez knows now that he's going to have to fight David Benavidez, and I don't think that he has a problem with it. Now, I do not actually think that he's going to take the fight next. I think he's going to try to do it in September. I think that Canelo was going to try to go after either Jamal Charlo or somebody else in May, and then I believe he's going to fight David Benavidez in September. That's personally what I believe. And the way that Jamal Charlo looked, he's definitely not beating no Canelo. I don't even think the best version of Jamal Charlo would beat Canelo. But Jamal Charlo right now, he stands about a 0% chance.
For Canelo Alvarez to justify avoiding him now, because the pressure is going to be enormous for him to take this fight. David just beat an undefeated 2-division champion that was avoided by Canelo once again for 10 years, and David knocked him out. This performance, without a doubt, makes David Benavidez the next Mexican superstar in the sport of boxing. And there's a very good chance that the torch is about to be passed down from Canelo to David Benavidez. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys.
And I agree that is pretty much their plan. Canelo Alvarez, I don't know if he really has much left juice in that orange right now or in that lemon that they're going to try to squeeze out of him. And I think they realize that David Benavidez, that he pretty much is the next step in Mexican boxing and in boxing. They know that Canelo is aging. They know that Canelo Alvarez is starting to slow down as a fighter. And there's only so many more years that you're going to want Canelo Alvarez in your sport to make money. Yes, he's a very big attraction. But if David Benavidez beats Canelo Alvarez, he can possibly get some of that attraction and move on later on down the line. He's already Mexican. He has a very big following. So once again, whoever's going to get the decision in that fight, depending on how close that fight is, I'm not really sure who's going to get it. Oftentimes, Canelo will kind of get it. You know, even if the fight is really close, he'll get the benefit of the doubt because he's such a moneymaker and he's a great champion. But David Benavidez is the next step in boxing. That's the way that they look at it. So we'll see. But anyways, I also want to rewind this because I don't know if I heard DontaesBoxingNation completely mention the 3-weight class thing. I'm going to rewind this really quickly and then I'm going to end the video.
And he punches. And Andrade, he was landing good counter punches and throwing good combinations. But you could clearly see a shift in the third or the fourth round. This is when Benavidez, he started landing more body shots and he started applying more pressure. And with Demetrius Andrade moving up 3-weight classes, he couldn't deal with the size or the power of David Benavidez.
With Demetrius Andrade moving up 3-weight classes, like, dude, what the fuck are you talking about? Demetrius Andrade fought at 154 like damn near 10 years ago. And at 160, he was already there for a few years. Once again, there's none of these same standards are ever applied to Canelo Alvarez or any of the other fighters that they don't like. Never applied to Lomachenko, never applied to Canelo. But once again, that goes to show you these guys' true motivations. They're a pro-racial, pro-black cult. All right? That's pretty much what they are. Moving up 3-weight classes. Like, are you kidding me? You know, where was this once again when Canelo fought Demetrius Bivol? Never happened. never was said overall about that. Like, get the fuck out of here. You know, it is what it is. Anyways, best of luck to Mr. Demetrius Andrade. He's going to need it because, once again, this pretty much was the last chance in his career. I just don't see a lot of people who are going to fight him right now, but we'll see. And I wish the best for him. I truly do. I wish the best for everybody. He seems like a very decent guy outside the ring. He seems like a very decent dude. But unfortunately, his career, possibly, you know, partially because of himself and partially because of outside factors, it ended up as a what could have been. You know, it is what it is. There's one of those in every single sport. All right. Back then, during the 80s, I believe it was Aaron Pryor, who I always thought was a bit overrated as well. You know, and there's you know, other ones that happened in other generations as well. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I just thought that I would talk about that, and we'll see where this goes. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later.